Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Dickey, Chapter President with Minnesota HSMAI. This is the next episode of HSMAI Minnesota Live. Today, we're sitting down with Stuart Butler, the Chief Operating Officer at Fuel Travel, here to talk to us about marketing strategies at your hotels. But first, I want to give you a couple chapter updates. Our webinar series that we're doing today is continuing later this month with Nora One, talking to us about upselling. So please watch our website and look into that, and register for that coming up right around the corner here. The other thing about our chapter that is most important right now is we're looking for more volunteers. We're looking for anyone who's willing to help us out. Whatever expertise that you have and what you want to do is welcome to us, and especially those working in social media and those looking to help out with member engagement. Those are our two biggest needs right now. It's a very easy time to start to volunteer with us. We're not doing any in-person events right now, hopefully to get back to those soon, but it's all digital and it's kind of on your own time. So you're able to work at your own hours and help us out as well as you can. Anytime as you can. Not a whole lot of travel or time commitments here. Just looking for someone willing to help out and get involved. It'll give you a lot of time to figure out or be familiar with how we work at HSMAI and how the board works, and then stick with us for next year as we start to get back into our normal schedule. So if you want to volunteer, please reach out to me or or anyone in our board. Log on to our website at hsmaiminnesota.com or follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you should be able to get in touch with us quite easily to talk to us more about volunteering. But with that, we'll jump into our episode of HSMAI Live here. Again, we're talking with Stuart Butler, the Chief Operating Officer at Fuel Travel. Fuel Travel is a marketing company that actually broadcast the #1 hospitality marketing podcast in the country. So very excited to talk with Stuart. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Stuart. And Stuart, you can take it away.
For your property, for your ownership, for your management company, doesn't matter who you are, where your focus is really important. Why that's important is best summed up by the wise words of one of my favorite people in the world, Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars. I am a Star Wars nerd. I use a lot of quotes from Star Wars. But he said in episode 1 of Phantom Menace that your focus determines your reality. And for us, a lot of us, our focus is beginning to shift to this right here, to budget planning, to spreadsheets, to profitability, to these things that we don't necessarily have complete control over. So we might spend the next 6 months, 3 months maybe, doing our budget planning for that to just be a complete waste of time. I would challenge anyone that's listening today to think back to this time last year and how important you felt that budget planning was. And then 2020 happened and it went out of the window. You know, that no one stuck to their budget in 2020 because no one saw this coming. And I got a feeling we're going to go through some big ups and downs and some more roller coaster rides before this is over. So if you spend the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks focusing solely on your budget planning, it's really a lot of effort going into something that's not going to meaningfully move the needle. Don't get me wrong, budget planning is important. Understanding and having a plan is important, but more important is what you're doing today to make a difference for tomorrow. So I want you guys to take a little journey with me. This is a trip down memory lane for me. This will be completely foreign to you, and then that's deliberate. So in the 80s, there was this show on TV. It was one of my favorites. I was born in 77, so I was, between the ages of 3 and 9 is when this show was at its peak. It was called Button Moon. And the premise of Button Moon was it followed the family, the Spoon family. So those are the folks you see over here on the left. There's Mr. Spoon, Mrs. Spoon, and then Tina Teaspoon was their daughter. And they had this amazing rocket ship that was made out of a baked bean can. And it had a funnel on top. This was their rocket ship. And every episode, they would jump in their rocket ship and fly off to Button Moon or to a foreign land, and they'd meet strange new people that they hadn't met before. and they'd go on adventures. And every episode, they would learn something new, some moral, some new insight, some new information. And then they would come back and be better for that. And each episode would kind of build on each other. So they were always learning, always adapting, but they were always hospitable to the people they met. And this is the mindset that we've got to adapt today. We are not facing the same world that we did 9 months ago. Everything is foreign. You've got to adapt to this new mindset that you're on a foreign planet with different consumers. Pretend like you're in a new hotel. You're starting a new job. If you've been in there for a month or 6 months or 12 months or 12 years, you've got to approach every day like it's a brand new day with new consumers, new demographics, new targets, new messaging, new fears, new motivators. The levers and the buttons we pushed yesterday don't work today. The ones we're pushing today won't work tomorrow. You've got to stay ahead of this, and you've got to continue to evolve. We thought marketing was hard in 2019. It's almost impossible in 2020, and it will continue to be really, really challenging for those that don't pay attention, because you're going to get left behind. So this, for someone, say you're a property in Minneapolis. I know not everyone here is from that city, but let's just, for sake of argument, say that a large percentage of your business prior to COVID was business travelers, people that look like this. The reality is these people aren't coming back in a meaningful way for the next 6 months. They might start to grow, and that might change, and we might pivot in about 3 months, but with some kind of vaccine. But for right now, you can't focus on business travel because the demand is not there. So focusing on business travel is akin to focusing on purple elephants. It doesn't make sense. Likewise, you can't focus on this. I had the pleasure of being at the high-tech event in Minneapolis last summer, and it was a wonderful event, wonderful city. Really enjoyed it. One of my favorite high-techs ever. Those expos, those conference center meetings, those groups, they're not happening in a meaningful way for the next 6 to 12 months. They're really not. They might start to grow, and you can take advantage of that as they do, but it's not where your bread and butter is going to be. If you're built to rely on the convention center, you're going to have to rethink your reality. It's just the way it is. You can't control this. You can only focus on what you can control. This is not your typical consumer anymore. So, we know the group and business is probably not the primary driver. The average tourist probably isn't the same person that it was 6 or 12 months ago either. The people aren't flying. This is just not going to happen. So you've got to focus where you need to focus. And we'll get into that in a second. So what you've got to do is become what I call scrappy. And scrappy is a word that I use a lot with our employees, with our partners in the industry at large. And to me, what scrappy means is there are two dictionary definitions. One is to be feisty. Think about Scrappy Doo from the Scooby-Doo cartoons. He was a scrappy little fella. The other meaning is to be made up of scraps, little pieces. And so to me, scrappy is a combination of those two words. It means that you've got to be a little feisty. You've got to be a little bit thinking outside the box. You've got to pull together information from various sources and teach yourself how to try things. It means you should always be testing. It means you should always be looking for the latest opportunity. That's the only way properties are going to survive today, is by being scrappy. And we'll talk about some specific examples of this in a while. But look around your local area, whether you're in a city or you're in the suburbs or you're in, some small town in Minnesota. It doesn't matter where you are. Look around. Why are people that are traveling coming to you? And now, this is a spoiler alert, more people are traveling than you realize. So why are they traveling? Figure that out, and then message the heck out of that. Tell other people why they're traveling and how they traveled and how successful their travel was. So I'm going to be digging into some data now. This is from a sentiment study that Fuel's been pushing out. It's a longitudinal study that we've been pushing out since, I think the first volume was surveyed to over 10,000 leisure travelers back in April. So April 2nd was the first one. We just published the 10th one a couple of weeks ago. So 10 different studies, lots of data that we're collecting. We've had over 50,000 unique survey responses. So this is probably the most comprehensive consumer sentiment study done in the industry since COVID started. I haven't seen any that have a larger over time database than this. And you can get all of the 10 volumes of this at fueltravel.com/COVID. That's our COVID resource center. There's a lot of information there, a lot of helpful tools, but you can also get all 10 volumes of this there. So fueltravel.com/COVID. We'll be digging into some of the data from the most recent rounds in a sec. So before I do, who am I? I'm Stuart. I already told you I was a Star Wars nerd. I'm a soccer nerd. I sit on the advisory board for HSMAI at the national level, very heavily involved in HSMAI. I'm passionate about this organization because it's helped me personally a lot, and I see it doing a lot of good in the industry. So please do step up and volunteer. Like Stephen said at the beginning, it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's something I started at the local level with the South Carolina chapter and got more involved at the national level. And it's a phenomenal organization. So I do encourage you to do that. I've been COO of Fuel for about 20 years, which makes me a Fueligan. That's the fun word we use to call our team members. Who is Fuel? We've been around a long time. We weren't always called Fuel, which is probably why you haven't heard of us. So we became Fuel Travel in 2015, but we've been around since the early 90s, solving problems. We have a lot of happy customers whose problems we've solved exclusively in the hospitality space. And we do a lot of research. Here's some of the types of clients we work with. This is not a sales pitch, it's just for your information, but we work with small flags and management groups. We work with independent boutique hotels and properties of all shapes and sizes. I think our smallest property has about 3 units. Our largest has over 500. So we really try to fit the needs of the individual. We have 3 primary products, which are our booking engine, our mobile app, and our CRM. And we also do everything you can imagine from a marketing service perspective. We're a software company that has services, so SEO, PPC, social, email, and build websites. And then importantly, we integrate with a lot of other suppliers in the industry. So this is where we get a lot of our knowledge from, is collaborating with these folks, doing a lot of surveys, doing a lot of studies, and really trying to understand what the challenges are facing the industry and how can we create solutions together to help the industry move forward. So what have we learned through all of that, through our sentiment studies that we've been doing this COVID one for 9 months, pretty much, or 7 months now. But we've been doing sentiment studies for about 7 years. So we're very versed at this. We've been around the block a little bit, and here's some of the cool data that we've learned that I wanted to share with you today. So how likely are you to book a trip? And keep in mind, these are people that have indicated that they are travelers, leisure travelers typically. How likely are you to take a trip or book a trip? And the way I'll break this down, it's kind of hard to follow, but basically the key is over here on the right, and it's very likely, maybe, all the way down to definitely not. So basically the bigger this part is at the top, the better. And then along the bottom, what we've got here is in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc. So this is going out all the way to within the next year. So what you'll see is what you would expect. People aren't as likely to travel in the next 30 days as they are the next 60, 90. So it progresses. However, if you really kind of combine some of these, 45% of people indicate that they may be willing to travel in the next 30 days. That's a huge percentage. And if you go up to 60 days, over half the people say, yeah, I might be interested in travel. 53% of people say they might be interested in travel. Today, I want to dispel the myth, and I think I will, that people aren't traveling, because I don't think that's the case. I bet if I polled all the people that have joined us today, more than 50% have already traveled. So let's see if that holds up at the end. But next data point, how soon will you be willing to make the following trip? This is just to make it interesting and make sure you're paying attention. We kind of reverse. So the bigger the bottom part, the better, the smaller the top part, right? So we said, how soon will you be willing to make the following trip? Along the bottom here, the dimension is drive up to an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, and so on, all the way over to the right, which is fly to a destination. And as you can see, you know, these blues, the bigger they are, the better. No one has an appetite to fly right now. Almost everyone is in the more than a year, 6 to 12 months kind of category. Those are the big ones. No one has an appetite to fly. But people traveling an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours are pretty high. So look, we see 71.5% of people, it's a huge percentage, would be willing to travel up to an hour within the next, it says months, days, but that's months, within the next 3 months. 33% would be travel up to 6 hours. So you can see the closer you are to the property, the much more high percentage chance you have of traveling. 71% of people within an hour of your property may be persuaded to take a trip right now. That's huge. That's a massive opportunity. So which of the following would most likely persuade you to book during the pandemic? So we know they could be persuaded. So what is it I can do to actually persuade them? So they get to tell us what it is. So number one, what the property is doing to protect guests. We see this again and again since the very beginning. In every one of the 10 volumes, we've seen that this is the number one. What are you doing to protect the guests? That's the number one thing, that's the lever that people can pull. Number two right now is packages and specials. What's interesting about this is back at the beginning, this was way, way down. This was like 7th or 8th on the list. People have gotten back to where they're in shopping mode, where they're looking for value, not discounts, they're looking for value. And so that is a lever that you can once again pull. This third one is one that a lot of people miss. They don't do this well, and this is something you can do better at. How the coronavirus is affecting the local area. And this is one that we'll talk about a little bit more later. All right. Look down here. This is an interesting one. Nothing. I have not already traveled this year. And then below that is nothing I have traveled this year. This is one that we've been monitoring over time. When we first began, this was over 50% of people said nothing, and I'm not traveling, I don't want to travel. This has dropped all the way down to about 14%, meaning that about 86% of people aren't saying that they won't travel. So that's another great indicator that people are getting ready, and that continues to shrink. So that's good news for all of us. All right, pick your top 3 reasons that would prevent you. So we're asking this from the opposite direction. So what is it that's preventing you from traveling? And this is from a study we did about 5 weeks ago. I forget which volume it was, 6 or 7, I think. Fear of other guests. This has consistently been number one. Other people are icky, they're oogie. People don't like them. They don't trust them. The political environment hasn't helped that much because everyone's in their little tribes, and anyone that's not in their tribal group is a threat right now. So this has been and will remain number one for quite some time. Fear of common areas was number 2, fear of hotel rooms, circulated air. And if we keep going down, we'll see budget concerns. And then all the way down 5 weeks ago, nothing is preventing me was down to about 20-something percent, 24%, let's say. So let's fast forward, shall we, to the last survey that we did a couple of weeks ago. So now nothing is preventing me has jumped all the way up to number 2. This is another positive indicator that people are willing. The percentage has gone up to almost 30% of people. It's now in the number 2 position. It beats out other fears, including common areas. Interestingly, and I don't have an explanation for this, but these two are flip-flopped in the fear of circulated air and the fear of common areas. But number 1 is still fear of other people. Interesting stuff. So how do we tackle that? This is a question that you need to be asking yourself with your staff. We'll talk about this in a little more detail in a sec, but fear of interactions with other guests, fear of common areas, fear of the room, fear of circulated air. These are talking points that you need to be focused on throughout your messaging. We'll touch on that in a sec. For your next vacation, what level of housekeeping would you prefer? So these next few questions, we're really trying to dig into What are the buttons we can push, the levers we can pull that will maybe make a difference for those people that are teetering on the edge? A lot of people are shopping, but they're not pulling the trigger. Why is that? We're not sure. So these next few questions, we're trying to kind of probe at that a little bit. So what level of housekeeping would make you, we know that they're fearful of the rooms, so how do we tackle that? So what's interesting about this is only when I request it is number one, but it's only just number one, and there's not really a clear winner here. I think the insight I got from this, and this has been fairly consistent over the volumes, is people want choice. People want to be treated like individuals. They want to be treated to their level of fear, to their level of tolerance. And every single individual that comes to your property is going to be a different level. If you really think about the first time you stepped out of your house during COVID-19, maybe you went to a grocery store and you were really scared. You kept making sure your mask was pulled up. You were looking around at everyone around you like they were the enemy. And you're really cautious. In every corner lurked this evil, deadly coronavirus. Then the second time you went, it was, you were still pretty scared, but it wasn't nearly as intense a fear. Your fight or flight or freeze system in your brain wasn't quite as on high alert because you'd already done it once. And then the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh time that you've gone to a grocery store, you probably now go in and sometimes forget to grab the mask from the car. It's natural, right? We've lowered our defenses. This is why we see the numbers going up in a lot of areas, because people have gotten a little complacent and they're not taking the precautions they were, say, 12 weeks ago. So we got to be careful. But the insight there is that everyone's at a different point in their recovery journey, depending on what their experiences have been. So you giving flexibility and choice to guests, something like saying we're only going to offer housekeeping upon request, is great for the largest set of people here, but it's not the majority of people. It's only about 26%. The rest want something different. So don't force people into this. Maybe strongly encourage it, but don't force people into something that may not be ideal for them. The other insight here is that this can be a good cost savings, because if your top two here, and these have jockeyed a little bit, but the top two right now are only when I request it or daily, but only switching out towels. This can save you a ton on labor. And when we're dealing with, cost challenges, maybe labor shortages, depending on your area, these two are things that you can implement that are actually going to save you time and money. All right, looking again at what we can do to pull levers, push buttons to motivate people. This one is, given the option, rank in order how you would most like to check into your next vacation. We know that common areas, we know that other people are fear drivers for people. So we asked this question. Number one, surprisingly, people still want to go to the front desk. Number two was via a mobile app. And then all the way down at the bottom was a kiosk. So anyone looking at investing in kiosk technology, thinking that's going to be the savior, that is not what jives with the consumers here. They still want to come to the front desk and talk to a person. And when we peel back the onion and look at why, typically it's because they have questions specific to their stay. But what we do find out is people really want to reduce the amount of time that they spend at the front desk. So something like a combination of a mobile app where people can fill out their registration card, maybe put in their credit card details, and then just come to the front desk to show an ID. That is the ideal scenario, because now people are, instead of spending 5-10 minutes at the front desk checking in, they're spending a minute. They can get their question answered and they can go on, maybe pick up their keys if you don't have a digital key, and go on. So what is interesting here is we did a lot of these studies and broke them down by demographics. We see that the top two flip-flop for younger folks. So millennials, those dreaded millennials, or believe it or not, they're now approaching 40 years old. So people 39 and younger, those millennials and Gen Z or Zoomers, these people saw mobile app jump above front desk. They don't want to spend time at the front desk. They haven't been conditioned that way yet. So they're willing to use a mobile app more frequently. How would the following hotel protocols increase your confidence? This is an interesting one. This is really interesting. So we asked a bunch of different things and we changed it over different surveys, but one of the questions we were getting a lot was, would leaving the room vacant for 24 or 48 hours have a meaningful difference? Well, we don't see a massive difference between 24 and 48 hours. And we also don't see that 24 is particularly impactful compared to some of these other things. So looking at the key on the right, what we're showing here is the bottom, this color would have, the blue would have no impact, up to moderate impact, and greatly increase. So what we're looking at is these top two bars being as big as possible. So which one has the biggest impact? It's a weird one. It's a deep cleaning between guests. So we really think about that. What does that mean? Well, it means what it means to the person, right? A deep cleaning means I'm doing something more than I did before. For most of you, you already feel like you're doing a deep clean between guests because you've got great housekeepers and great protocols. But the guests don't know that. They don't know what you're doing. So as long as you're doing a little bit more than you were before, saying that you're doing deep cleaning between guests will impact 92.8% of people. 92.8% of people indicated that knowing there was a deep cleaning between stays is going to have a positive impact and make them more likely to book a hotel room. So just by saying, hey, here are the things we're doing, or one of the things we're doing is a deep cleaning between guests, that's going to have an impact without even having to explain specifically what that means. Psychological, it has an impact. So these are the kind of little nuggets that we're looking for. Actually, going back to that, there's some other things we asked, like tape on the room. We asked a mobile app for check-in. All of these things are very easy to implement. Giving the toiletries at the front desk instead of leaving them in the room. All of these can have slight nudges of psychological impact. So maybe you can do a combination of these. They're all impactful. And it's all about psychology. It's all about making the guest feel safe. This is a bonkers one. So this is one that's obviously very hotly debated. And this is about the masks. And what we've been seeing consistently, and this actually switched again in the last survey we did, but we've seen, would a mask ordinance in the local area impact your travel plans positively or negatively? So would you be more likely to stay, less likely to stay, or unchanged? What we saw when we first did this is it was really split evenly. And what we've seen over time, I think as people are becoming more educated, is that people that would say I would be less likely to stay has decreased, which is a good thing. We see this, interestingly, not surprisingly, that the younger people skew, the more they don't want to wear a mask. So the younger people, this piece of the pie is a little bigger. And then finally in this section, this is one of my favorite questions in the survey. We've been asking since the very beginning, what one word comes to mind when you think about traveling right now? And you'll see that there's some similarities. This first one was back in April. This last one was the most recent study. This is a word cloud, so the larger the words, the more they were used. So you see safety is still the number one in both. But words like scary have decreased tremendously. And we've started to see a lot of positive terms come in. This is a psychological shift in mindset. So things like relaxing, things like ready have come in. And then also people are being a bit smart. They're being like, cautious, fearful, but or careful. They're willing to do it. My personal favorite are the people on both sides that say just, nope, I am not traveling. That's my favorite right there. But what you can see is over time, consumer sentiment has shifted, continues to shift. This looks different every single time we do it. We've been surveying about every 2 or 3 weeks, and it shifts tremendously each time. Safety will continue to decrease, scary will continue to decrease, and those positive words will continue to increase. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of travel right now. So, or the good, the not so bad, I guess, and the ugly. So this to me could be the biggest stat of the entire presentation, and that is that over half the people that were surveyed indicated they have traveled since March 15th. And like I said earlier, I bet if we ask everyone on this panel, go ahead and put it in the chat, whether or not, yes or no, whether or not you've traveled since March 15th. In my office, about 80% of people have traveled. Any group that I've talked to, at least 50% of them have traveled. This number holds up across the board. The majority of people in the US have traveled since March 15th. That is big. That means we've hit a tipping point where travel isn't this shamed thing anymore. There isn't a stigma to travel like there was a month, 2, 3, 4 months ago. And this number has grown rapidly over the last, say, 4 weeks. About 4 weeks ago, this number was in the 30%. So through Labor Day weekend and beyond is where it's really grown to where it's more than 50% of people now have traveled. This is killer information. Knowing that half the people have traveled, about 84% of people are open to travel, is big news for everyone. So we wanted to understand about their travel booking patterns and behaviors. So how far in advance did you book your trip if you have traveled? This is not surprising at all. It's skewed, recently, although some people had travel plans for the summer, a few months in advance, but the vast majority within 30 days. There's a lot within 1 to 2 weeks, as you can see here. So this is kind of last minute, spur of the moment travel. It's important to know that because the messaging you're pushing out should be focused on that right now. What was the reason for your trip? I mean, this says it all right here. And when I told you not to mess with groups or business or other stuff, the vast majority of people that have traveled, it's a vacation or visiting friends and family. So you got a few other things here like business trips and weddings that you shouldn't completely discount. We've got a lot of properties that are having a lot of success with elope type weddings. So there's opportunity in these, but your focus should be on vacations. Now, this is where I think there's a massive opportunity and something I want you all to take close attention to. And that is, how many trips have you taken since March 15th, 2020? Although the largest number here is 1, it's only about 43, 44% of people have taken 1 trip. The majority of people, over 50% who have traveled once, have actually traveled more than once. And one of the things we've learned, just like with the analogy of the grocery store, once you've traveled once and realize it's okay and that responsible travel is okay and safe, you're more likely to do it again. And we're seeing shorter trips, more frequent trips, and different trips. So if you can get people to come back to you again and again and tell them the different things they can do each time, this is a really big opportunity through the fall and into the spring. So this is where your focus needs to go. How do I get people that are traveling to travel to me? And then once they travel to me, how do I get them to continue traveling to me? And then, did the property meet your expectations? This is the not so bad. This is pretty good. So at the bottom here is the did not meet expectations. This big bar here in the middle is they met the expectations and then exceeded and greatly exceeded at the top. So what we're looking at is these bottom chunks. So where do we maybe miss the mark on people that are traveling? And if you look at the number 1 and 2 here at the bottom, availability of amenities and social distancing were the 2 where people were maybe a little disappointed. So just keep that in mind. Keep people informed. Communication is the key through all this, making sure people know what's going on, why it's going on. That is critical. And then, did your property communicate the following? This is the ugly part to me, and maybe one of the last stats we'll talk about, and then we'll do some takeaways. So did the property communicate the following to you prior to your recent stay? So as you can see, properties are doing an okay job. So it's over 70% giving people information about how the property is protecting guests. Keep in mind, that's the big motivator for people. Local mask ordinance was up there pretty high. Updated check-in procedures was pretty high. So that's interesting. So what if we flip this? What if we ask the guests what they want to hear about? So this paints a very different picture. Local mask ordinances is more important than the property. Just because it's a politicized hot topic right now, I would imagine that will drop back down. It was lower, but the most recent one, it jumped up just because it's been so prevalent in the media. But right behind it is updated property updated cleaning protocols at the property. So this doesn't quite match, right? So if we compare the 2 and we look at what people are getting and what they want, this is an opportunity for you to learn something here. So Here's an example. What people want is pretty much they want it all. There's not that much of a delta between the top one and the bottom one here. It's maybe 10, 15%. And there's certain things that we're missing out on tremendously. So here's one. On the left side, we got open status of local restaurants. No one's still talking about that. It's about 30%-ish. But it's number 3 in the list of what they want. About 70% of people want to hear about that. When people travel, they're not just going to sit in your hotel room the whole time. They're going to do things. They're going to do it responsibly with a mask and eat outside, but they want to know. So you can, there's an opportunity here to do a better job of telling people what's open, what's not, what the special conditions are, all those kind of things. So this is one that we'll share this deck afterwards, but this is one I really want you to pay attention to and kind of go through this list and say, am I doing a good job communicating this before people arrive? So that's the data side. Let's look at some insights, some takeaways, and then give you some tangible homework, and then we'll field some questions. So insight number 1, people are traveling. This is definitive. The majority of people have traveled. The majority of people, 84% of people are saying they're willing to travel. But the types of people that are traveling are different. It's shorter durations, it's last minute, and it's closer to home. You really got to adjust your targeting, your messaging to approach these people in the right way with the right types of things. Insight number 2, this is a psychological battle. Yes, there's a virus going on, there's a health concern. The reality is that the danger posed by COVID to the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of your staff, if you follow protocols, if you have the right protocols in place, the risk of the virus is pretty small, right? But people's fears are very real, and their perception is their reality. What can you do as an individual property or group of properties to maybe eliminate some of those fears through reassurance, which is probably the word of 2020. Everyone talks about reassurance. But what are the specific things we can do to identify the hot buttons, the fear points, and then address them directly? Things like offering a mobile app for check-in to restrict their time at the front desk. Things like offering a deep cleaning between guests have massive impacts in terms of reassuring guests, making them feel comfortable. And then really on the psychological side, communication is the key, letting people know. Your rules of engagement with communication have fundamentally shifted. You can send more communication than you used to, especially once someone's booked. If you send 1 pre-arrival message, maybe start sending 2 or 3, depending on when they book. Letting people know about what's going on at the property, what you're doing to protect them, what the area status is, what's open, what's not. Reevaluate that stuff. And then thirdly, things are changing really rapidly. The one thing that's kept our heads spinning throughout this is we'll do surveys a week or 2 weeks apart, and we'll see fundamental shifts, primarily driven by the media cycle. Whatever the news du jour is, whatever's going on from a political aspect, we're seeing people getting polarized. We're seeing people getting fearful all of a sudden for something they weren't fearful for before. So you've got to stay tuned in. You've got to stay informed. You've got to make sure that you know what is going on. You've got to be ready to adapt really, really quickly. And this is a key insight. Every guest that comes to you is an opportunity to, 1, learn why did they travel. If you can learn why they traveled, then you might be able to find more people in that boat, the people that are willing to travel and go and visit that local attraction or that local restaurant or that local landmark, whatever it is. Why are people traveling that are traveling? If you find that out, these are the early adopters. You can use that in your marketing to maybe entice more people that think the same way. And then secondly, you can use the people that are traveling as an indicator to other people that it's safe to travel responsibly. And responsibly is key, because we don't want people to get shamed or the stigma to come back. We want people to know that places don't spread COVID. Places don't spread COVID, people spread COVID. And you're safe in another town as you are in your home. You're safe going to a restaurant in your hometown as you are in Minneapolis, as long as you're responsible. This is the message we have to keep telling people. And using videos, photos of people that are traveling already to illustrate to other people that they can too, really taps into that wonderful psychological hack called social proof, where people are more likely to do something if someone else has already done it. So 2 things to do right now, and then I'll field some questions. 1, leverage your owned assets. What I mean by that is really reevaluate your CRM, what data you're collecting, what messages you're sending, how frequently you're sending them. Update your surveys. If you're still sending the same survey today that you were sending prior to COVID, you're missing a massive opportunity. Ask people why they're traveling. Ask them what they expect. Ask them, will they come back, and what would you need to do to improve it? These are questions that can make iterative improvements to your property and make people a lot more likely. Once someone's traveled, you need to be doing everything you can to incentivize them to come back again, and to also go and tell all their friends that they traveled. And one of our favorite tools is a product called Flip2. Some of you are probably familiar with it, but it's an advocacy platform that allows guests to share their stories. Using tools like that right now can have a massive impact, especially if you put those stories into your messaging. Become a resource. One of the big opportunities right now is people don't know what's going on in a local area. They don't know what's open. They don't know what's closed. They don't know on the property level or the restaurant level or the attraction level. Spend some time being hyper focused on your local area in creating blog content that talks about this and keeping it updated. Becoming a resource will help people find you. We're seeing a lot of properties that just put up things that are open in our town, and people landing on that page and going on to drive direct bookings through having landed on that page. So become a resource for your local area and be the definitive resource for your property as well. Offer flexibility and unique value. I'll talk about some unique value in a sec, but flexibility is the key. Uncertainty needs to be met with reassurance. As I said, flexibility of cancellation, flexibility of housekeeping services, flexibility of how they check in. Flexibility is what's going to make each person uniquely feel like they're valued, and that they can trust you, and that they can feel comfortable staying with you. And then finally, like I said, turning your guests into pioneers and advocates, making sure that every guest that stays with you has a great experience, number 1, leaves a positive review, number 2, and goes and tells the world, number 3. That is what you should be focused on right now, these 5 things related to your owned assets. The second thing you can do right now is being scrappy. So get more targeted with your ads. I'll give you some resources in a sec that help you that, but geo-target the heck out of the 1 hour, 3 hour local market. Really be aggressive. Don't worry about people coming from California right now. They might come, but don't spend a ton of money trying to attract them. People are not jumping on a flight. Look for strategic partnerships. Find people that have similar values to you, maybe in your local area, looking for the same people. This could be restaurants, this could be local attractions, and do joint promotions. This is an often overlooked way to stretch your dollars, to build awareness by sharing databases, by sending messages to their database, them sending yours, and offering value to people. Third, always be testing. Test everything. No one has a playbook. Anyone that comes to you and says, we know what's going to work, kick them out of your door, because they don't. No one knows what's going to work tomorrow. Just because it worked yesterday doesn't mean it's going to work. So be testing rapidly, constantly, evaluating, pivoting all the time. And you're going to fail a lot, but every time you fail, make sure you learn something and apply that to the next time you test. I will say that we've had clients that have tried things that work really well for them, and then we've tried it with other clients and it didn't work. So your unique situation, your unique location is going to determine how effective it is. Encourage responsible travel. We've talked about that already. Make sure people that see that other people are traveling, make sure that people that are traveling are being responsible. We don't want the media to turn on travel like they did at the beginning of the pandemic. Right before July 4th, things were turning around for a lot of destinations, and then the media jumped on the fact that people were traveling as a super spreader. That is false. It is fake news, and we need to keep, as the industry, keep telling people that responsible travel is safe. And then stay informed and adapt quickly. So a couple of examples of people that have been a little scrappy and done some things. One of these is my client, one is not, but things like staycations, workcations, work resortly instead of remotely. Those kind of messages are having a good impact. People are willing to try new things. They're stuck at home. They might want to come away for a couple of days. This next one's pretty cool. This is a quick video from one of our clients that's focusing on learning. A lot of people are doing this where they're focusing on the fact that kids are working remotely and they need somewhere to go because people have to work. So this is the Shawnee Inn and the Poconos, and they're getting a ton of business through this. They're getting a lot of kids that come and stay with the property. The parents may be working remotely during the day while the kids are being monitored, or even locals that are taking advantage of it. So these are the kind of things you can do to be scrappy. And then finally, stay informed, read about the trends, get inspired from others, go and sign up for as many newsletters as you can from other people around the country that are doing a good job. Talk to your community, make sure you're engaged, you understand what's happening, why it's happening, so you can adapt quicker, learn from your guests, and then finally listen to the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast. And there's a couple of resources for you guys. One is, I already mentioned, the Fuel Hotel, the Fuel COVID resource page. And the second is HSMAI. I've been doing a really good job with the global coronavirus recovery resources. If you haven't checked it out, it's on their hsmai.org site. I'll send you this so you have the link. But they're doing a lot of videos. Sign up for their weekly insights. They're doing a lot of videos, a lot of how-tos. It's really, really been helpful for a lot of our clients. Listen to our podcast. Here are some of the recent episodes that could be really helpful for you. So if you subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, just type in hotel marketing, will come up number one. Here's some of the episodes we've done recently. The most recent one we published actually today, episode 164, which is the Hunter Hotelier, which really digs into what I was talking about earlier, which is become a hunter, not a gatherer, and how you can specifically do that. So these 30 minutes to an hour long, they really dive into some unique, valuable tips. So really, when you leave this, I want you to really ask this, or remember this saying. When we ask the question, where is your focus? Where focus goes, energy flows. Where you focus today is going to determine where you end up tomorrow. So with that, I will hand it over to any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Stuart. Fantastic information. Yes, does anyone have any burning questions? I have a couple, but I will open it up to the phones to see if anyone would like to jump in and ask Stuart a question. Looks like there's one in the chat here. Mike wants to know, can you provide more information regarding the survey audience?
Yeah, so it's North American leisure travelers. The first survey went out to a large database. We had about 10,000 responses. The age demographics are on each of the surveys. So if you go look at the response or the actual results on the fueltravel.com/COVID site, you'll see at the bottom the demographic breakdowns. So it skews a little older, but we have representation from, I think as young as 18 all the way up to 70s, 80 years old. So we break all that down. We break down the states. It does skew East Coast. We have a lot of folks from places like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia. So definitely kind of, it skews a little bit just because of the nature of where our database has been grown over the years. But because, the first few were going out to 8,000-10,000 people were responding, it statistically is very representative of North American leisure travelers. And these are all people that typically have indicated that they travel within once a year, typically. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, great. Any other questions out there on the phone? You can unmute yourself if you want, or use the chat. Okay, so while we're talking about the survey a little bit more, do you have any insights about the spending habits of the folks that are traveling now? Are they spending as much as they were on their last trip, less, more?
Yeah. It's interesting. So it depends on who your demographic is that's traveling. Younger folks, people 35 and under, really up to about 40, these millennials, they've been kicked in the teeth again. You know, economically, they've always kind of struggled. They hit hit the workforce right during the 2008 recession, and they've struggled. So their spending has come down a lot.
Okay.
But either side of that, there's interesting bands of people. There's this group of people that lost their jobs, were low income, and early on that $600 a month or a week extra unemployment benefit actually pushed them into a higher income bracket than they were before. These were the early travelers. This is why, and I don't know if you guys saw this in your local markets, but we saw in a lot of markets where the people traveling weren't our typical consumers. They were causing more problems. There was just a lot more to deal with. They weren't a typical traveler. And these were low-income folks that now had disposable income for the first time in their life. Now that's gone away, and it's been replaced with this band of people that I would say are middle class to upper middle class, that didn't have interruption in their work schedule. So their income stayed pretty steady. They were already making decent money, but because their expenses have decreased, they don't have the kids in sports, they're not traveling to sporting events, they're not spending as much on entertainment. They have a little more money, and they're in this psychological mindset where they feel like they deserve to splurge. So what we've really seen is that there's a recovery a little more rapidly in higher quality properties, like slightly upscale properties seem to be rebounding a little faster because people are treating themselves. So we are seeing that. But now I feel like we're kind of getting past that to where these early travelers in the nuances of those is being replaced by what I would consider typical travelers. So the types of people that would normally travel are now traveling. They're just not traveling the same. They're not traveling as far. They're not doing the same things. People are definitely open to different adventures. One of the things that COVID's really done is knocked us all off of our run-of-the-mill day-to-day routine. And so it's created this thing in our brains that makes us more susceptible to try new things than we would have before, you know, which is why you see more people early on baking banana bread and sourdough. People had more time and they were willing to try new things. Well, the same is happening with travel now. People are willing to go and travel somewhere they've never traveled before, considered if there's something interesting there. We're seeing a huge growth in things like heritage travel, people going and learning about you know, historical events, especially with, you know, all the stuff that's going on from a social perspective right now, right? All of the civil unrest, all of this screaming for equality and equity and inclusion. This is a hot topic, and if you have stuff in your local area that's historically of relevance, people are willing to travel to do that. But again, it's 1 hour to 3 hours seems to be that sweet spot for shorter durations, but more frequently.
Right. The thing is pointing out what your property can provide for that, and that's good. You know, one other thing I've noticed, and I wanted to add a little data to your presentation here, is that, you know, if we look back at the occupancy levels of the United States, you know, when we bottomed out at 21% occupancy back in April, you know, it only took us 4 weeks to get to 30, then it took us 4 weeks to get to 40, but we've been at 40 for the last 17 weeks, maybe up to 50 in a couple of weeks, but we're kind of hitting the upper 40s right there over the last 16, 17 weeks. And what we've noticed is just right what you said in your data. You know, people are still traveling. People are traveling. We're not at the bottom. It's not 20% anymore. And then also what this tells me is that the people who are coming to your hotel have probably either been there before, they've traveled before, or they're going to travel again. And so it's important to get in touch with those guests and stay informed, because the data is telling us that, you know, they'll be back, or they'll want to be back, you know, or they've already been there. So, and
they'll influence others, right?
Right.
The interesting thing about the tribal nature of humans, right, and how we all kind of hang out in our same organized groups, homogenous groups for the most part. People that we hang out with tend to look and think a lot like we do. So your next best guest is the guest you already got. They're more likely to stay with you. But the next best guest after that is always their circle of influence, their friends and family, their social followers, their family, their friends. So understanding that and turning your guests into the pioneers, in the advocates to tell other people, hey, I did it, you can too. That's really powerful leverage right now.
Right. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up today? Okay. Stuart, thank you very much. This is all fantastic data, and we will be sharing this with all of us on our social channels and on our website, so our members will have access to it. But again, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. This is all great and helpful, and hopefully you all are having a great week, and we'll talk to you again at the end of the month when we do our next episode when we talk about upselling and actually talk about what Stuart was just talking about, or what we talked about there is that folks are willing to travel. And actually what we'll find out in next month's podcast or in next month's episode is they're willing to still spend. Ones that are out there traveling have the ability to spend more, and they are. So we'll learn more about that next time. So thanks everyone, and have a great week.
Bye guys.
Bye, Stuart.